Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021, and the school committee is in session at 6:52, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Agenda item number 2, our school committee member introductions. We'll start with Ms. Paquette.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Geneva Larita, Ward 3.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Megan Parks at large.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Agenda item number 3 is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that members would like set aside? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted. Agenda item number 4 is to receive and approve the nomination of the assistant principal position at Lewiston High School, and Superintendent Langlis will present.
I'd also like to offer for Principal Tyler Putnam to come up if he'd like to share a few words. Principal Putnam enacted a process in which he had various members of the school and other stakeholders involved in an interview process and screening candidates. And they've selected a candidate I know I'm familiar with, who I'm excited about, who can do some good things with school. But Mr. Putnam, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, we're very excited for the nominee tonight. Went through a rigorous interview process. Also was a part of an interview process this past summer, so we got to know Mr. Dumont quite well. Highly recommended. Shown a lot of leadership skills in his previous job at LHS. Great student connection guy. Supports them on a regular basis. If you spend any time in the high school, you'll see him walking around in a bow tie, unfortunately, but no, he's very proud of what he's done for us already, and looking forward to working with him in the future.
So just a little bit of history too. Doug Dumont has been running our aspirations lab as our aspirations coordinator. He's worked closely, obviously, with high school students on their aspirations and post-secondary efforts, from college to training to programs for certification. Some things that some people don't realize is he's also our lead for our bridge year work and connected to other college experiences and early graduation programs at the college level, and work closely with LRTC and their students. So a bit of a crossover. And his history extends back a bit into middle school math. So he's got a unique perspective around the teaching and learning curriculum, but also in and around kids and culture. And I think the environment he's created in the Aspirations Lab is one of warmth and welcoming to students and relationship driven. And I think that he'll bring all of those characteristics to his new role.
Mr. Dumont, would you like to speak before or after we vote on you?
I'll wait till after.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept Mr. Dumont as our assistant principal at the Lewiston High School?
So moved.
And a second?
I will second.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Congratulations, Mr. Dumont.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank all of you for your service on the board. I'm on the board out in Topsom, and I'm very jealous that your meetings only last 3 hours. We're good 5 to 6 on a regular basis. So some nights I'm not home till midnight. So thank you for your service. Thank you to Mr. Putnam, Mr. Langlis. It's been an interesting 8 years at Lewiston High School, and today was probably a very challenging, one of the most challenging days for me, to step away from a role that really has been the greatest job that I've had so far. And the interaction that I've had with students and staff, administrators from the school level to the district level and the community It's been a privilege and an honor to be able to do that. And when this opportunity came up, I couldn't pass it up. We've worked really hard together as a school community, and it's time to continue that work. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without my family and the support of all the administrators in the districts, current principal, past principals, and assistant principals. So thank you all very much, and I'm looking forward to this next amazing adventure and opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. Agenda item number 5 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public present that would like to speak? And are there any members online that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item number 6, to recognize the Lewiston Public Schools staff and the departing committee members. I don't have anything to say. Okay.
So Chair Parks and I have worked together over the last few weeks here to make sure that we try to do something for our school committee members that are departing. It's been a pleasure to work with each of you in various capacities and in different timeframes. And the first person we would like to recognize is member Geneva Larita, who came into the committee. She was an appointment of the mayor. She's been an advocate and very good at communicating concerns that have come up. And clearly an advocate for education as a whole, as an employee at Bates, who I believe is getting close to working on tenure, maybe oversharing, I saw it. But again, we'd like to just say thank you for your time and your service and your dedication.
Thank you. You weren't here long enough. We've appreciated you having you here and the time that you've been here, and wish we could keep you around a little bit longer. But thank you for what you've done while you've been here.
Also stepping away, but has served through some pretty rough waters, but has been committed to supporting students and just dedicated service and leadership on behalf of the children and adult learners of Lewiston as a whole. And someone who has always brought good heart and significant meaning to tough decisions, comments and input, both in the public light, but also behind the scenes. So thank you for your time and your service to Linnea Hawkins.
Linnea, I wanted to say that I appreciate that you always, no matter what the discussion, you always bring the perspective of the community, the underrepresented people in our community. And I've always appreciated that about you. It's been refreshing to have that on this committee, and that'll be missed when you're not here. I'm sure other people will bring it as well, but thank you very much.
And last but not least, member Ron Potvin, who was unable to be here tonight due to some prior engagements. He's actually not in the community right now. He's traveled, so he wasn't able to join us this evening. But Ron obviously has been an active participant. And again, there's these times of COVID and some pretty tough decisions and good work around policy, but also finance subcommittee chair and done some good work around getting our district, I think, to where we are and put it in the right direction. So Ron, just knowing you, I don't think you're watching because you're not one to participate via Zoom, but with all due respect, sincerely and genuinely, thank you very much for your service to our community. All right, next up, we have And I just want to share publicly, as I did last time, that we've had kind of turn the page on recognitions. I want to make sure that we're doing that on a regular basis. And we just have so many things to celebrate and recognize in our community that we're just going to do a few each time we get together. My inbox has a litany of these, and really we focused on who could be here in person tonight. And so we have a group of people that have been nominated by Principal Jim Cliff. And Jim, do you want me to read your statement, or do you want to come up to say anything? Go for it. Okay. Montello's custodial team has been shorthanded since the summer. Our 4 custodians have continued to muscle through the daily demands of maintaining the building, resupplying personal protective equipment, and responding to the frequent requests for mop-ups, paper towel refills, and the like. Norm Mosier and Wilmer Moyes quietly go about their work. They are reliable and always good-natured. Jacob Noyes and Brandon Gothier, who's the lead custodian, have gone the distance, working many overtime hours in order to ensure a clean learning environment for all students and staff. There isn't a request they haven't been able to deliver on, and they always do so with a positive disposition. We are deeply grateful for their strong work ethic and dedication and pride that they display daily. Words cannot fully convey the recognition that they are worthy of. So tonight we have in person Jake and Brandon, and we'd like you to come up to receive a certificate of appreciation and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you guys and your whole team.
You have Alyssa Mitchell on the online.
I don't see that name though.
Alyssa Mitchell.
No.
We did have one more, but they were going to participate remotely, and I don't know if it was the start of time or not, but that individual is not here, so I'll hold on till they can be available. I'd like to recognize them in person. Just save it for next time. I'll save it for the surprise.
Okay.
Thanks.
Agenda item number 7 is to receive and approve a field trip request to travel to Jazz Allstate in Bangor. And
You want to share a little so they know? Jenna's coming up to present real quickly. Jenna, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit, it's been so long since we've been involved in some of these kinds of activities with kids who are really standouts. If you could just share a little bit about both the requests, but also, the event and just a bit of history about it.
can you, no, push the button, the face button. There you go.
Are we good?
Yes.
All right. Hi, so I'm Jenna Nelson. I teach at the high school, a variety of music classes, mostly the instrumental classes. And actually, I've been here 12 years and I don't think I've ever actually had to present this particular field trip to the board, but it's an annual event. It's the Allstate Jazz Festival. Schools from the whole state participate, or rather they compete by having audition processes in the fall. And the best of the best are selected to participate in the event. And we have 2 students that were selected, Wayne Shaw and Keenan Bowden. They should be recognized. We had students in the past, like pre-pandemic, that went to it. It's this year up in Bangor. We are staying at a hotel for 2 nights. All the students and teachers will be there. So there's a lot of supervision and they stay really busy rehearsing all day. And then they give a concert on Saturday. Do you have any questions for me?
So this is an overnight trip that they go up and travel, but I think I just wanted to share a little bit of light to maybe some new members or people who aren't familiar with the trip. And Jenna's been doing this, as she said, for a very long time and does a great job. These students are really standouts. Typically, they go to the jazz competitions. So special musicians that really represent our schools well. So thank you, Jenna, for all your efforts.
And we'll have another festival coming up in May. I don't have the paperwork in yet, but there's a classical band and orchestra, Allstate, and that'll be in May. And some of the same students will be participating in that. I think we have 3 students going to that. So you'll hear from me again then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And second,
Second.
Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9 is to receive and approve the second reading of policies JKAA, JKAA-R. Yes. Pardon? Oh, did I skip 8? Oh, I skipped 8. I apologize. I checked it off ahead of time. To receive and approve the first reading of policy JICA, student dress. Superintendent Langus will present.
Yeah, so I'm revisiting this from conversation that started last spring. And some students had expressed an interest in some changes. And we did a survey with community and staff and got results of that. And that all funneled into work with the policy subcommittee here recently. And so we have a first read of a change in the student dress code. And so some key changes of note that really working hard to make sure that the board or policy will not interfere with the rights of student choices for dress unless it creates a disruptive influence on the school program or effect on health or safety. Some of the stipulations remain. Articles of clothing that promote or reference illegal behavior are not allowed. Clothing that is destructive to school property, but that has been narrowed to things that are more relevant, like cleats in the hallway, things of that nature. And some language has been pulled out to essentially allow things like hats or hoods. And there's a set of process and expectations here. Also knowing that teachers or staff may require special clothing for health and safety reasons, workplace setting type things, or in the shops. And this also cross references policy JICIA, which is connected to weapons, violence, and school safety in the student code of conduct. And so it led to some items being removed from the dress code policy as there was some duplication in other policy. But this is a significant shift, and I think it's one that's, according to the survey input, the student input, the family and community input on that survey, that this is the direction that our community would like to head.
Ms. Bowden?
First, I just want to say thanks for working on this. I know it was pretty important to a lot of our students. You might have just answered my question, but I just want to clarify. In the policy that I'm looking at with the striked out language, it got rid of articles of clothing that may be considered weapons, spike collars, chains, sharp objects. So you're saying that that is a part of another policy. That's why it was taken out of this policy. I just want to be clear because that is still not acceptable. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So, and those items would be covered under weapons in school, whether it's clothing or non-clothing, it's still covered under the code of conduct for weapons. And that list gets very specific with those kinds of items or things that are considered weapons.
Any other, Ms. Whitlow?
So I'm not exactly sure without looking at the weapons policy, exactly what's in there, because that's not something that I remember us going over necessarily. But I know that when we discussed, chains or collars with spikes and, I think it was very important to me that that if it's not being used as a weapon, that we shouldn't be making students not be able to wear like spikes on their collars. I mean, if it's not, but I don't really know. So I don't feel it's like 100% confident that what's in the weapons policy is going to cover some of these things. So I don't want there to be any misinterpretation. So maybe we pull that up and look at it. I don't know. But I just think that without that wording, I don't know if we're giving you the answer that you think we're giving you, and maybe I'm completely wrong and oblivious to what that other policy is. So I don't want to vote on something you don't know about. Do you have like concerns specifically?
Well, I do. I mean, if something can be used as a weapon, whether it's intended to be used as a weapon or not, if a fight broke out and something was grabbed because it can be used as a weapon, I understand what you're saying. But that's kind of like saying, well, I have a pocket knife in my pocket, but I don't plan on using it as a weapon today. I just have it for part of my outfit today. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Well,
So
I
I just
mean-
want to make sure that we're super clear. There needs to be boundaries as far as
Maybe
dangerous things.
knives and things. Oh, you do have it up, Karen. That'd be great if you could read it.
Your mic is on.
It was me. That was me. I tried to get to it. I was gonna share.
Sorry, I didn't see.
I was gonna share the policy.
I think so it might be helpful. The discussion that we had in the policy subcommittee was really around, there have been comments, like there were comments in the surveys that came back and said like a student is wearing like a studded collar as part of their outfit. And so if I'm not allowed to wear my hood, why is this student allowed to wear a studded collar? And I think that the direction in eliminating that language from the dress code policy, but keeping it in the weapons policy, was to really draw the line between what is an actual weapon and what is a 12-year-old girl wearing a studded collar from Claire's that is clearly not a weapon. Like, and to make that differentiation so that kids can still have some autonomy in the way that they choose to dress and express themselves, but have the weapons policy to cover things that are actual legitimate weapons. I think that that's where the differentiation comes.
Or being used as a weapon.
Right.
Anything that's being used as a weapon, no matter if it's a weapon, is not okay and
Right.
would be on policy.
So the language that we referenced or that we use the term use of any object, although not necessarily designed to be a weapon, to inflict bodily harm and or threaten, intimidate, or harass. Examples of such articles that belt, stick, objects capable of
I'm sorry, does that kind of make you feel better about it? Or do you have any issues with that?
I mean, yeah, overall, I think, it's pretty clear that, you shouldn't have any weapons with you at school. I just found it fascinating where that language has always been there. It was taken out and I don't know. Just recently with all of the fighting that we're hearing about and stuff, it just makes me a little nervous with language like that missing. It just was an extra layer of protection, I think. But it sounds like it really wasn't being followed in the first place. It sounds like kids were wearing that stuff anyway. So I'm kind of indifferent about it, to be honest with you. But I was just more curious as to why we're striking that out. That's all.
So, and I hear your point, absolutely. The prior policy cited those kinds of things underneath B, which was clothing that is destructive of school property. And so it wasn't about a weapon or violence. It was about, you can't do certain things because it could scratch up the desk or chair. So those things are in play anyway with the current language that's being proposed. But why it went into things that made people think about weapons when we had a policy that was more articulate about you shouldn't have those things at school at all. it didn't matter if it was part of your clothing or not. To me, I felt like it kind of muddied the waters of, I can't have it at school because it could scratch a desk versus, no, that's a weapon. You can't have that at school. And so I actually feel like the shift coming out of this about destructive to school property allows for the other policy to have a little more weight to it for things that really should not be at school.
Any other discussion? No. Any members of the public wish to discuss this? Online or in person? Seeing none, we will go to, oh, is there a motion?
I was wondering, what do people feel if we make it so that we don't have to do a second reading on this? Instead of voting for the first reading
I was
now?
going to say, we can, we have the option, we don't use it very often, but we do have the option to waive the second reading so that this policy goes into place right away after tonight. I know that a lot of committee members, we've heard from the students on this, and this is something that has sat with this committee. So I think it would be appropriate in this situation for us to vote on it instead of carrying it over to the next committee, if everyone's okay with that. So then does the motion put this in place and waive the second reading, or do we need two separate motions? Okay, so first we'll motion for this and then we'll waive the second reading.
I move that we approve the first reading of policy JICA, student dress.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any further discussion? Ward 1,
yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
yes.
Motion passes 6-0. It's my understanding that there might be a second motion.
I move that we waive the second reading and allow this to take effect immediately.
Second?
Further discussion? Ward 1,
Yes,
2,
Yes, I just want to be clear. It's just this policy only?
Yes,
Okay.
this one only.
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
yes.
Motion to waive the second read and make JICA student dress adopted as written passes 6-0.
And
Ki-
can you really
oh.
briefly let us know how this is going to be dispersed to the schools so that everybody knows the policy's been updated so that it's being implemented universally?
Sure, I think initially I can follow up with an email to all staff, letting them know that this has been changed, certainly with management for our principals and directors. So this is a shift, this is a transition, so we'll have to adapt to it. I also believe that part of the intent of this policy was that it is encompassing and not space differentiated unless it's necessary for programmatic reasons.
Thank you. Did you have something else? No?
Oh, I just want to say yay, like kids can wear hats tomorrow. That's exciting for so many,
Yes.
just that little bit.
Jake, how do we disseminate this change to the students? It's one thing for staff to be able to administer it, but how does this get out to the students so the students have a better understanding of the expectation that yes, some of this is allowed and some of it is still prohibited? Because it seems to me that it's sort of a two-pronged communication approach.
I think that's an excellent point. So I'll make sure to ask our principals and directors to make sure that it gets out to their student populations as well.
Student announcements at the school level or something? Yeah. All right, agenda item number 9, to receive and approve the second reading on the following policies. JKAA, JKAAR, IJJ, IJJE, IJL, IJNC, IJNCEI, and IJNCE2. Are you going through these all individually, or can we vote on them as a?
So we did a first read on these and we went through them last time. There were no edits recommended. And so I'd be comfortable with approving these as a second read as a group, if that's okay with the committee.
Can I make a motion or do we need to discuss it first?
Does anyone have anything to discuss? No, you can make a motion.
Then I move that we approve the second reading of all of the following policies that you just read off. I'm not going to read them off.
There a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. And Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, agenda item number 10, to receive and approve request for substitutes under policy BCC nepotism. And Superintendent Langlis will present.
So by policy, if we have situations of nepotism that potential or occurring at the next available timeframe, we share that with you. And we make sure that that's known and ultimately has to be approved by the committee. And so recently we had a situation pop up with the principal at Farwell, whose children, who are adults, have started as substitutes in the district. And there are occasions in which they are placed at the school in which she is the principal. And just, we haven't seen any issues connected to that. And I wanted to message the school committee, but also just to make sure that this was approved. So in that particular instance, you have substitutes that could have some feedback from the building principal, who are the children of that said principal. And so wanted to bring that to you. With our staffing shortages, I will be honest with you, I would take any capable subs that we can. The initial report back on these two individuals, they're actually quite good with our kids, and I think that's a plus. But ultimately, it is your call to approve those two instances if you wish to do so.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Mrs. Hawkins.
I would just say it appears there's a healthy awareness of a possible potential, and that's all I need to know.
Mr. Damon, did you?
Chances are that she could be tougher on them than she is.
Right.
I know how my wife is. so.
Any other discussion? So do we need to make a motion, or is this just an acknowledgement of it?
No, it's got to be approved.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the request for substitutes under policy BCC nepotism.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Agenda item 11, to receive and approve items to be submitted for the fiscal year 23 Lewiston Capital Improvement Plan.
All right, so I shared a document in the a memo in the packet for today's meeting, but I wanted to walk through some of the items because I think some of them are pretty predictable and have been talked about at some level with the facilities and or the finance committee. But there's also a couple things in here that I wanted to give us an opportunity to say publicly, but that while it's early, some of the financial planning around some of the things that we've discussed and have more discussion to be had, they're included, and some of them are costly. And so I want to make sure that you're aware. And so you'll see in the document, I broke it down by multiple years. So FY23 would be the items that we'd be looking to secure for next year if approved. And these items, once approved by you, with edits or not, will go to the city administrator for conversation with the city council. And so these projects, they have a criteria. They have to be capital improvement in nature. They have to be $50,000 or more, and some other specifics. So just to share things that were shared with us, and we were looking at in FY23, work at Montello on hardscape, playground and outdoor learning center. The retaining walls in the front of the building are really aged and starting to fail. There's also some spaces out back with the new greenhouse that we'd like to upgrade so that that's a more usable space for students and staff. Also, the Montello elevator has some significant concerns, and the estimate on that is there, but replacement of an elevator is quite costly. So you're looking at $150,000. Montello roofing replacement in here for $175,000. That's a continuation of prior approved funds and additional funds coming up. So you'll see it in multiple years here. Work at the Green Ladle discussions, and this was had some prior approval around potential for a divider wall. That's an item we want to revisit with them to see if they're still wanting to do that to better serve our community. A facility conditions assessment, otherwise known as an FCA. Our facilities director, Josh Bro, is finding himself incredibly busy with all the projects that we have going on. So busy, in fact, that we're trying to facilitate all the projects getting done. But one thing that he doesn't have the time to do currently that he really believes strongly would be a good thing to do would be to have a facilities condition assessment. And this could help guide and plan future items. But this is essentially you bring in someone who, this is the kind of work that they do. They look at your facilities, they look at the breakdown of it as things depreciate and require attention over different age spans. And I don't know if Member Damon wants to chime in on that item. He's much more familiar in that area than I. In addition, the LHS Kitchen update, it's really aged and equipment is starting to break down. We've patchworked some things, but it's really a matter of time. And for those who are unfamiliar, between the cafeteria here and the high school cafeteria, meals for numerous other sites are prepared, packaged, and shipped, including community partners that contract with us to provide lunches. And so if we lose one of those two kitchens, we are really at a deficit. So there's some significant cost there to that improvement. In FY24, again, you see that last part of the Modular roofing. There's some piece of it in this year's budget. The next one is the one I really wanted to make sure I said publicly in front of you, while knowing there's a lot of work to do and a lot of things to consider, but it's a grades 6, 7, and 8 and central office expansion project. This would be to assess the needs if we wanted to do this. Certainly Dingley it's not in great shape, and the cost associated with fixing Dingley are in the millions. And it's not that that can't happen, but we've also outgrown it, and we've outgrown it a great deal. And so it's I think something that needs to be discussed. We can't have these discussions without talking about how we might secure some funds. So I put in here $18 million, and in the write-up of the LCIP, because we submit forms to the city, we talked about really coming up with a concept plan, trying to figure out, would we be better off using consultants to figure out if we should lease, if we should buy land and build, if we should buy something that's out there that's used and renovate it to fit our needs. But in the mix of all of that, at a recent meeting, we talked about having a subcommittee that would just be talking about grades 6, 7, and 8. And what would that look like to alleviate by pulling 6th grade out of every elementary school and having more middle school capacity to have 3 grades, at least 2 different sites. And I say that because our middle school is packed. And even if we pull half of those 7th and 8th graders out, if we move the 6th grade, it'd be very challenging. So this is a pretty dynamic shift in conversation. And to approach the funds and conversation, I think is an important step if the committee supports it. In addition to that, you see it on FY25 with 18 million there again. And again, not knowing what, say, first phase would be more of that concept plan with an architecture firm. What are the best options? Having someone help us with that process. And then a phase 2, acting on that proposal if the funding can be secured. The next item is the Dingley, district modular upgrades. So we have 4 modulars at McMahon that are requiring pretty regular service because of their age, up to a point where we had actually some of our maintenance folks who really expedited an entryway water issue to start the school year. And I'm appreciative of that. Ultimately, we're not in a place to use it, and the way things have unfolded, there's concern about it moving forward. So there's money in here over a 2-year window to repair or replace those. Also at Longley, we have 4 modulars that again are pretty dated, not necessarily level. And as we continue to grow programming there and adult education, looking at ways we can support that effort. Next item down, you have the LHS roof replacement. That's a significant project, and that's in that time frame. We also have Montello exterior upgrades on here. Their entryways and facades, some of the trim, things of that nature, they're just aged. They need some attention. A lot of doorways that are aging significantly and need to be replaced. Geiger would like to add a playground. They're at a capacity now where splitting the two groups of students would be much more beneficial as far as spacing is concerned. And so that's in here as a proposed item for FY '24. 25, we have, again, the modular part 2, the grades 6, 7, and 8, and central office expansion part 2, and then some additional funds for the LHS roof replacement to spread that out. And so the way this process works, if approved by the committee, we would forward this on to the city and see where the process goes from there. I'll open up for any questions or anything.
Member Bowden.
Sorry, this is my first time being involved in anything like this, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around the money amounts, and are there any grants? Where does this money come from? I guess is my question.
So the capital improvement process has a funding stream, and there's connections to the city and just the asset improvement. But for example, the new fire station on Temple, that was an LCIP connected project. Bruce, I don't know if you want to chime in. Bruce was chair of the planning board for a very long time. He knows the process inside and out.
Yeah, the LCIP is a yearly exercise. It's a planning document. It's a long-term planning document. Many items will show up for 5, 6, 8, maybe 10 years before they finally happen. Sometimes they're there for a while and then it becomes obvious that they're not something that we should do. Typically, these monies are bonded by the city. They're granted to the different departments. There is almost always something for the water department and for the sewer department. The public works always gets something. They're replacing vehicles, or they're replacing, they're paving, or they're doing, curb work or something. So these are projects that really are not part of an operating budget. These are projects that are bonded. The city council actually has some limitations on how much they are typically going to bond. And then they work around that typically. There was a proposal for a number of years to actually reduce the total bonded debt indebtedness of the city. If they retired $10 million worth of bonds in a given year that had been paid off over a period of time, then initially they would be allowed to rebond $8 million, 80% of what they retired. And that really was to, over a period of years, it takes quite a while, but to reduce the city's indebtedness, to expand beyond that 80% typically took a supermajority. It has happened repeatedly. And sometimes it really makes sense. Last year, there was, because of ARPA money and the pandemic money, there was a significant amount of money that was available. So the LCIP got funded partly through that and partly through their bonding work at a much higher level than it typically would have, which is catching up. I mean, the 80% I felt always put the city, and particularly the school department, at a disadvantage because we were never keeping up. We were always falling short of work that needed to be done. Last year's LCIP request from the school department was just north of $5 million. $3.5 million of that was for boiler replacements at the middle school, and that was funded and that was approved. So that project is going forward. So the LCIP here is a long-term planning document. The 3 fire substations started showing up in the LCIP in 2016. And they were supposed to come right along, one a year after each other. And they were supposed to be $3.3 million. Well, they finally got North Temple Street built 5 years later at about $7 million. So as a planning document, it only starts to really try to focus you on projects. It's nothing in here is typically cast in stone. As we've seen over the years, escalation of material costs, labor costs, and everything else has a tendency to skew these things higher as we go along. Now, not everything that's proposed on the LCIP in any year is funded. And then almost always the city council will look at this and say, well, okay, you guys asked for 5, but we'll give you 3. Pick your poison, take the ones you want. They don't typically try to specific projects. They would just say, here's the amount of funding we'll give you. Although the projects themselves, department by department, have to be well-defined and have to be pretty well explained so that city council and the public has a good idea of what they are. I've seen, I guess, maybe close to 15 of these LCIPs over the years that I've been involved with the city. And, there's been some interesting projects. Things that do get on this are like expansion of the airport. It's over in Auburn. We don't think much about it, but Lewiston have half of the responsibility for it. So there's always stuff that's in here, but this really is about how the city is going to control the bonded indebtedness of the city as a whole, department by department. And it's a long-term planning document. That's why there's 3 years here. Typically, there might be as many as 5 years associated with some of these, which makes sense in the long run to know what's coming and gives, like with the 6-7 and the administrative thing, what would likely happen is there would be a couple of $100,000 to hire an architectural firm to design it. Sort of what happened like with the expansion of the high school. You start off that way. Now that's bonded indebtedness that went to referendum because of the value of it. And that was not part of the LCIP. But this is typical capital improvement stuff that has to happen on a yearly basis. Like I said, Public Works is a classic example. They need 2 new dump trucks. They need a new road grader, and they're going to pave, 13 miles of city streets and replace curbs and stuff. So those types of things, you can't really take those out of operating budgets because they're just too expensive. So they're bonded. And I would have to say that Ms. Hunter, the current administrator of the city, had done an unbelievable job managing the financial side of it. She's a wizard at getting bonds written off early and reducing the interest costs and stuff on them. And that's really helped manage the LCIP over the period of time that I've looked at it.
So these are more or less suggestions, and they might choose to pick some of them up, and some just may keep rolling over until they decide that it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
It's basically.
that's why it's year after year. Yeah, they come back around. Like I said, the fire stations have been on there. The 3 fire stations were listed in like 2017, 2019, and 2021, and they would be done by now. We've managed to get the 1 done. So it usually takes a lot longer than that's predicted, and that's not unusual. I mean, if you look at what happened with the expansion of the high school, there's a 5-year project. We started the actual planning of that thing in 2017, and that we're almost there, but it's going to be 2022 before we actually occupy it. These projects don't just happen, and especially with construction the way it is right now. So.
One good example of this is actually in the paper. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, or at least recently, was the police department. And so they had put that in an LCIP for a multi-year project, I think at 34 million, don't quote me. And ultimately what they found is that they can lease space, renovate some things, and save a number of dollars locally from that perspective. So that's the way that they're going. I think without that initial concept plan or an architect being involved to look at what our needs assessment is, it would be hard for us to know how much, in what way, and things like that. But I still think it's hard to start a conversation if there's no investment in the effort. So one thing that the committee could do is to recommend that we expand this out for more years. I did put 3 on purpose, thinking if we wanted to bump some things out, we could go year 4, year 5. I'm open to suggestions and edits.
I think too, that we have a deadline for when we're supposed to submit this. It has to go to planning first, I believe, before it goes to city council, right?
Yeah, I think that the timing of tonight was not an accident. I know we talked about it a while back, just to give you an update. And then we met with facilities and finance, and some different ideas were brought to light and some requests so that this incorporates that as part of our process. But it's usually around the 2nd week of December that the city will need these things approved by this committee for them to move forward for consideration. But please don't think that approving this even if it's with edits, means that we approve these expenditures. It means we've approved the next step in a conversation around planning long-term.
I'll say that on mic. That's exactly what I needed to know. Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins?
And I will say that Finance Committee has been over these things ad nauseum, trying to find ways to get them done responsibly. And we have talked about stretching this out 4 and 5 years, because we know that as much as we want it done tomorrow, this is Lewiston. Tomorrow is probably 3 years at least down the road. So
Thank you. Any other discussion? Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the recommendation from the superintendent to list these on the LCIP for 2023. I think it is. Right. 'cause
And I
we're
will
in
second.
22 now already, right? We're 23.
He was changing it from 23 to 22.
No, this is 23.
22 to 23, okay.
okay, and I seconded what he just did.
Okay. All right, Ward 1,
Yes.
2. Linnea seconded.
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Agenda item number 12, to receive an update on language for fund balance policy.
So in another memo that I had shared, we looked at, bear with me, I gotta get it. We've been in discussions for some time about our fund balance carryover or fund balance. We don't have a policy as a school department, and I do think it makes sense to have one. And so we've worked closely with Member Potvin, but also looking at recent state legislation and rules. And so the memo that I shared is a little wordy, but I want to focus on some of the bullet points. This is going to require further school committee action. But I did want to provide an update, and I know that Member Potvin wishes he was here because he wanted to speak more about this. But I think these bullets capture the conversation we've been having. So finding a way to use a graduated formula to bring our fund balance to 50% of any intended use of fund balance over multiple years. It's a lot of words for really what's saying is, if we use 5 million this year in unspent funds from last year, then we should be working to reduce that over multiple years. So we're not dependent on the unspent dollars, but that we're budgeting responsibly for what we spent. The real challenge we're having in the pandemic is that we have a labor shortage across all of our areas, as does everybody else. But every time we have a labor shortage, so if we don't hire a custodian, even though we need that custodian, those funds remain in our budget and they remain unspent because we didn't hire someone for that. So in a shortage era, it's pretty challenging because we're going to end up with larger fund balances than we would have in the past, which is spoken to in the third bullet where it talks about to use a 10-year average of the fund balance. The other thing that's complicating things is we have these emergency relief funds of different kinds that have come through. And as you know, those of you who were on the committee last year through the budget process, we moved a lot of things, supplies, periodicals, books, things of that nature that I'll be bringing back to you in our budget process this year to say these really need to be in our local budget because the emergency funds are going to sunset. And so in that effort, we have to strike a balance between funds that we don't spend and making sure the things that are supposed to be in our budget can be maintained with a level of sustainability. But I also think it's good fiscal practice to have some limitations so that we're not trying to use too much of any one fund to do certain things. And so the second bullet is a supermajority clause to exceed policy use. So whatever policy is decided upon, there would still be the room for the committee to exceed that. One example that might exist for that is last year in the budget process, late, we added an assistant director at ELL. And that was requested by Director Barber. And obviously we had a concerted effort in that area. But we had also heard from the city council that there was really a cap on what they were willing to approve for the school department. And I think the committee did a lot of good work around it, but ultimately we used additional fund balance, money that could have sat in the bank to to pay for that. So that's just one example of when that might have brought about a vote to exceed the use of fund balance. The 10-year average, I think, is really important. These last 2 years have been unique, to say the least, because of the pandemic. Next year, I'm not sure what that will bring us. But if you're using a 10-year balance, those anomaly years should level themselves out. So we have a good number to work off of. And then also language that guides budgeting between the minimum established by that 10-year average, but also never to exceed the state maximum, which right now is at 9%. Is that right, Mr. Grant? 9% with a tiered or phase out back down to 5% over the next 3 years. So I don't want to muddy the waters. This isn't a policy before you today, but I wanted to give you an update. I do think it's important that we have a fund balance policy, and these are significant steps in that direction. And ultimately, the policy subcommittee will have to review this, and we'll bring it back to you.
Thank you. All right. Agenda item number 13 is report from the school committee chair. I wanted to, again, thank our outgoing members for their service over the various points of the last 2 years. And I wanted to share with the public that tonight before this meeting, we had a short workshop with the incoming school board members through Maine School Management Association. It was a boardsmanship training that was sort of an introduction to boardsmanship. Next Monday, we are going to be using the space at the Green Ladle, and we'll be having a kind of a pre-retreat with the incoming board members and the current board members to do a little bit more work on boardsmanship. And then we have our normal full retreat after the inauguration in January. And so I just wanted to share that we're setting the stage to have a highly functional and collaborative board moving forward. And I'm really looking forward to starting that work with the new year. That's all I have. Agenda item number 14 is a report from the superintendent.
I don't know if you get the calls around busing or if you're tired of hearing my voice all hours of the weekend, but I apologize. I just want to give families every opportunity to plan or to have to back out of plans to transport their students to and from school. And it impacts everybody, on a different level. So I'll continue to communicate those. I will try to be as succinct as I can when I communicate them. But I have heard from people that they appreciate the updates and the information, even if it doesn't apply to them, because it might apply to someone next door, across the street, or a neighbor, what have you. So we'll keep sharing those things. Head Start has issued a mandate around vaccines, testing, masking. And I'm sharing that with you because that mandate is out there and it is active. And it has language in it that includes any kind of crossover. And so places that we have crossover connect to Head Start are with our promise programs. And so one of the, at least my initial read of the language, is that it reaches across lines like the bus that brings students to here, because we have promise programming here at Connors, that driver might be susceptible to this language, that the custodian that helps in that space might be susceptible to language, the nutrition staff. And so with all this crossover, I'll use the word directive that I've shared currently with our upper level administrative team is that so long as the circuit court has a stay order on the emergency temporary standard from OSHA, that our hands are tied. And so that's the course I'm taking, unless the committee would like to direct me differently. But I wanted to make sure you were updated that language exists. The stay order on the OSHA emergency temporary standard obviously still remains, and that's briefings have been submitted or are being submitted, I believe. So we may know more about that coming up. The state had said that the Bosch committee was going to meet on December 2nd with a report out by December 6th. That's the state version of the OSHA committee. And there was some concern from a legal perspective that even though the national level was in circuit court, that the state could make some decisions around that. What they came out with for an announcement last week was that they're not going to do anything with that until the circuit court work is done. So right now we're at a standstill where we have some things coming through in a one version of a mandate, and we have another mandate that sits as a stay order in court, and a state OSHA group that is not acting on that until that has a result. So there's these two parallel lanes that are colliding, and I'm of the opinion that until we have a resolution with the circuit court, that we are responsible to follow that stay order. Um, In addition, it was shared with us today without a lot of detail that the standard operating procedure, and to spare you the acronyms, essentially the rules that guide us with contact tracing and who needs to quarantine and who doesn't, all of that, that those are being reviewed by state officials, and we anticipate some shifting language in that. Sometime in probably the next few weeks. I don't have a specific time frame, and I don't know the specific topics, but I do think they want to work on keeping kids in school more often. We have brought on 2 nurses, or are bringing on 2 additional nurses to help with the workload of our nurses, and to help facilitate things like the follow-up testing from different components. And so we're very pleased to add those 2. Our clinics that we held last week, just as a follow-up from the ones in November, that required parent consent. And for those who wish to do so from ages 5+, including boosters and first and second doses for those who needed that at that point in time appropriately with permission. We had over 800 people participate in that. And so we're very pleased with the turnout, and also want to thank the public health nurses and state resources for their help with that planning. The last thing on my update list is about snow and remote days. And just to say so again publicly, that this committee had approved a while back that we would have the option of either, depending on the circumstances of the weather. And what I want to share publicly is that while both those are still options, we do have requirements from the state that students can access their learning, that lunch is available, even if we don't bring it to them, to have a remote day. And so logistically, we have most of that planned. Dave is actually actively turning on a whole bunch of MiFis for students who might need it. And so what the plan is in the short term is we have access to the remote days, but we want to make sure things are in place to do it. So in the short term, if we have inclement weather that warrants a remote or snow day, it's going to be a snow day. But what we're planning administratively at the district level is having the hardware in place so that we can say to people, look, Wednesday may not be so good. We need you to have these items with you. And they go home with you. And Karen, Bill, Sue, and I even debated, maybe this is seasonal. I don't know how this will work in the future, but hypothetical October 15th, you take home these things, and it would have some things that you would need at home, like a winter snow day remote bag, if you will, that has a notepad, a pencil, a ruler, what have you, but also has a MiFi if you need network. And then that would just be home. And then if we have a remote day, we would, or anticipate the potential for one, we would ask students to make sure they take their devices home or access materials we provided in advance. But I just want to say publicly that we're not going to just say, hey, tomorrow's a remote day and not have that planned out. And but that's in the works, and we have some things coming. That's it for my updates. I don't know if there was questions on any of those items.
I have a couple questions, not just in regards to snow days, but like with the busing situation that we've had with random buses going offline. I guess my first question is, have a lot of students been missing school because of the transportation issues? And then are we dispatching out MiFis or things like that for students that are stuck at home because of transportation issues? How are we navigating all of that?
Yeah, great question. So there's a number of things that are happening. Some schools are able to maintain staffing levels enough to use our vans to go get kids. That's happening in places. We do have MiFis that are available. Our office has them. Dave's already activated all of them. So if, for example, if I had to go home, whether it's close contact or I wasn't available to get a ride to come to school because of buses, that I can call the office and I can request a MiFi, and that can be available to me for use, for that moment. The MiFi thing with the remote snow day is the volume of them. So when we have a group of kids that are out, we have those. It's when a whole district says, today's a remote day, we have to ensure that access to learning. And that's a lot more hardware, but good question. We are seeing absences. That's the truth. We are seeing absences both from uptick in things like we saw a lot of absences when we had that spike in pool testing results, not last week, which was much better, by the way, but 2 weeks ago, there were parents who were saying, okay, I'm seeing that there are 39 pools in the first couple of days of the week here. I'm going to keep my kids home just until see how this settles down. So we have absences, close contacts, quarantine, spikes in cases which have caused parents some concern, busing and transportation interruptions. So all of the above, which is making continuity and education in the classroom a real challenge.
Ms. Hawkins?
Just want to say I really appreciate the forethought going into the planning around these snow/remote days. It's always better to have a plan than to just hope it all happens. So I really appreciate the forethought that's going into that. I know it's time out of your day and Karen's day and Sue's day, but it's really invaluable to our students and our families. So in my opinion, it's well worth it.
Thank you. And I'd also add that I still intend, and as a superintendent, or prior to being a superintendent, I always wondered why, if we knew a big storm was coming, we didn't call it the night before and just let people know. And so I still intend, when we have those big storms, to let people know as soon as possible so that we can plan accordingly and people don't have to worry about what that next day will bring whenever we're able to do that. The storms don't always cooperate, but that's my goal.
Ms. Bowden?
Yeah, so the last time that we met was like a month ago, I believe our last public meeting. And at that time, COVID was really spiking in our district, and you brought up the pool testing, how there was a lot of numbers. I'm just curious now if you can give us an update, like what are the numbers looking like right now? I know the homepage you added the COVID count, which is great, but I don't think it's been updated in a month. So I'm just curious where we're at.
So the COVID count, the dashboard on our site, I update every time I get an email that notifies me of a staff or student that has tested positive. I go right into the chart and add it. So unless I haven't been notified, those are actually up to date, including today. Had 2 today. So those have been included. It's positives from that date. That's when I started it. Maybe I can clarify that. So I do go in and add them. And again, as long as the data is shared with me, which people are asked to do, as soon as I get that correspondence, I go plug it in. But to your point, we did have that huge spike in pool tests. Last week, it was much more quiet. Karen, did we have, I don't know if you recall the number, I want to say 11 positive pools last week. If it wasn't 11, it was around 11. Trust me, we were watching our email because we get notices, and we can also go into their site and get it a little quicker than the email notices. And I tell you, when I saw 31, 32, 30 the week before, it caused me some anxiety, but last week was much more calm. I'm real curious what will happen this week because of that window after the Thanksgiving and families gathering and whatnot. So we could see it increase, we may not. I will say from my inbox perspective, the last week has been much more quiet with COVID positives overall than it was the 2 or 3 weeks prior to that.
Any other discussion? Mr. Damon?
Jake, I know that last year was certainly an anomaly that we hope we never see again. But there was thought about, maybe delaying the start of school in January. Last year, I believe we did, just because of the sheer numbers of people that were sick at that time. Is there even a plan in the event that we start to see a spike coming out that we might suspend school for a week or two to try to take the edge off of that? Or we're hoping that enough people are vaccinated so we don't have to do that?
My initial response is I'm monitoring data points every day, including staff availability, bus transportation availability, weather, but also nutrition capacity, custodial capacity. There's a number of things right now. And I used to think that it was like one area. So if you didn't have enough teachers, like you just didn't have a choice, because of different impacts. If you didn't have enough nutrition staff and you couldn't provide lunch, you just didn't have a choice. The difference I'm finding this year from last year is it's a combination of all of them. So it's how many nutrition staff are out, what can you cover? How many drivers are out versus what can we pick up for? And all of these things, they start to make a puzzle. And so I'm blessing and a curse looking at those talking points, not just daily, but on a trend, looking at pooled results. It's just a constant. But what I will say is another big difference from this year and last year is last year we had no ability to monitor with pool testing. We had no ability to follow up with individual buy next now tests. We did not have 5+ vaccines. And so and I say this from a sensitive lens that, am I willing to reach out to the community to say, I think we need to close schools? I am. But I also think we have so many pieces in play now that we did not have last year, that my first priority is going to continue to be in school in person. I just think it's so much better for our kids and for routines and for the teaching and learning that can happen with the limited continuity. But I would say I've also learned that I think we came into this school year thinking this was going to be the rebound year and we were going to do this, this, and this. And what we have found is this is a year of let's get through it together and continue to build community so that we can really rebound down the road. But we're doing everything we can. We have a lot more tools now than we had last year. So if I had to predict, I would say that we'll be in person following the December, January break.
Any other discussion? Agenda item number 15, school committee community announcements. Ms. Bowden?
All right, I just want to say to the community that's listening, teachers, students, winter sports are back up and running. And it's been kind of an exciting week of that. Hockey, indoor track, basketball. Forgive me, I don't know everybody's schedule, but I do know that tomorrow night, the boys basketball teams have their home opener. So I think JV's at 4. I'm sorry, freshmen's at 4, JV's at 5:30, varsity's at 7 o'clock. They're playing Oxford Hills. Should be a great game. And it's a really great night just to bring your kids out and get out of the house. So fans are welcome. Just bring a face mask. You're welcome, Mr. Fuller.
And swim. Swim is a winter sport. That
Yeah,
started
swim
also.
too. Sorry. Yes.
I just want to add to that I've gotten some questions actually recently about what are the expectations for winter sports. So Lewiston as a community, we've gone forward with the same recommendation that we have for outside of school hours, which is the same as we've done for plays and things of that nature, where masking is recommended but not required. But just so you know, from a venue perspective, but also from a who we're hosting or where we're playing at perspective, we are following the most restrictive expectations of any team we compete against or the facility we compete in. And so, for example, there'll be some places that host us that the team may have a certain level of expectation, but the building that's housing the competition may have a COVID card mandate or an absolute mask mandate. And so spectators need to be aware of those things. Locally, again, we are following the expectations of the most restrictive competitor. So when we play at home, if we're playing school X and they require masks, at the door we'll be requiring masks. If we play school Y and they have it be recommended, then we will also have it as recommended. And then when we travel to other sites, we follow their rules. I just wanted to say that out loud. So our staff aren't put in a position where, well, how come this competition is different than last time I was here? And the rule is, the rule of thumb, if you will, is the team we're competing against has a more restrictive policy and we're going to honor that. So that's why it might shift on people.
Ms. Whitlow?
Will there be concessions? Because that's really what I want to know.
Yeah, we've been doing concessions at our sites. Not all schools are. Some schools are doing no concessions. Some schools are doing COVID cards. Some schools are doing athlete vaccine mandates. Some schools are doing voucher systems. So only so many guests can come per family. And so we'll have to be mindful of those things when we travel.
Agenda item number 16, future agenda items. We don't have Ron, so we probably won't have future agenda items tonight.
14.
All right. 16. Future agenda items is number 16 on the agenda. There's Paul. Paul, do you have any future agenda items? Give him a minute to get settled. That's all right. Is it Miss Rich? All right, we're on agenda item number 16 for future agenda items. Do you have any in mind or do you want me to move on? No. You're good? All right. Agenda item number 17, to enter into executive session to receive and approve the superintendent's evaluation by school committee members in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056A. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And Ward 1,
Yes.
2,
Yes.
3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
7.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 8:08.